You might think that the electric car was invented last week by Tesla. But did you know that in the year 1900, 38% of all cars sold were actually electric? So if electric cars were around at the turn of the century, what happened? We're gonna take you through a brief history to talk about why they were so popular, why they failed, and why we're seeing renewed interest again today. So during the 1800s, people all over the world were playing with new ideas for forms of propulsion, and there were no shortage of crazy ones at that. So we went from this era of people that were reliant on horses and buggies into this new age known as the horseless era. So in 1876, this guy named Nicholas Otto invented the first practical internal combustion engine. Then 10 years later, Carl Benz of Mercedes-Benz put that motor to use and made the first practical road-going car. But when talking about electric vehicles, which we'll just call EVs, we have to go back to 1832 to visit with a guy named Robert Anderson. He was a buggy maker who electrified one of his buggies, making the first crude electric vehicle. But as the 20th century neared, the world began to urbanize and there was a sudden demand for personal transportation. Around 1890, a guy named William Morrison in Des Moines, Iowa, invented the world's first road-going EV. In the early stage of the horseless era, there were three main sources of power vying for dominance in the marketplace. There were gas cars, which we're all familiar with. There were also steam-powered cars and electric cars. Steam cars took an immense amount of knowledge, tools, and fireproof clothing to make work. Gas vehicles, while they're simple in today's world, back then you had to crank start them and have a good mechanical understanding of a car just to make one start. Electric vehicles, on the other hand, offered a clean and simple mode of transportation. You simply plugged them in to charge them up, and then you had a good vehicle for 30 to 50 miles. A number of notable people were involved with these early EVs, as this was new tech and it brought out countless entrepreneurs. You had Dr. Ferry Porsche, who made the first hybrid electric vehicle around the year 1900, and here in the States, Thomas Edison actually owned several EVs and was obsessed with creating the perfect EV battery. So these early electric cars are really, really rare, but we've had a number of them here. We actually have one in the studio right now. This is a 1916 Roush and Lang. This body style is called a Brougham, and it's what most electric cars look like in the era. Uses artillery wheels, those are wooden spokes. Coming to the back, there's a hatch, and there's a hatch in the front as well, but this is where the batteries are stored. Originally, it would have used a little bit of a different battery arrangement, but you can replace those with deep cycle batteries that you get at, say AutoZone. Check out this interior. This is actually the steering wheel, which some did use steering wheels, but most electric cars used a tiller like this to control your front wheels. Then over here is your throttle. It's got nice vases. All the windows do open, which is really nice. It's got simple instruments, but they're really easy to drive. So let's take it down the road. All right, so immediately, the most unusual thing about an electric car is the fact that it's basically silent. You have a little bit of road noise, mostly have the sound of an electric motor whirling around. But what's neat about this one in particular is that it's nicely restored and it's big. A lot of electric cars were massive. Some of them are not so massive and some are small, but this is on the bigger size. So in terms of scale, you're in a really top heavy car. So you have to think about that when you're turning, and you have a tiller which makes more aggressive steering motion than you have with the steering wheel. But otherwise it's easy to operate. As you probably already noticed, I'm pushing this lever here with my hand. That is the speed control. What it basically does is as you push that forward, it increases voltage supplied to the electric motor. It works in the forward gears, and then in the reverse gears, there's a button on the floor that you push to engage, and you engage the same gears backwards. And in 1916, something that a lot of cars didn't have, instant torque. That's the advantage of an electric car even today, is that your torque delivery is instantaneous. It's not breathtakingly fast, but just to get from A to B, it served its purpose. Another big advantage to the electric car is that while it wasn't meant to go fast, it was thoughtful about people and how they were arranged in here. So you have two seats in the front that face you. We could have a full conversation. And also, look at all the glass. It has amazing visibility. It'd be perfect for taking your driver's test. Can you imagine showing up to your driver's exam in a 1916 electric car? All right, so if these cars are so smooth, quiet, and clean, why are we not all driving EVs today? So first off, in 1912, a guy named Charles Kettering invented the self-starter. This was a huge leap in automotive engineering because it made gasoline cars far easier to operate. There was also a gold rush of a new type when new oil reserves were discovered. This allowed for more gasoline to be produced, which made gasoline both more readily available and far cheaper. But the final nail in the coffin came from Henry Ford in the form of his Model T. The Model T was actually decreasing in price throughout the teens and was far more affordable than an EV or most gas cars in that era. So once the Great Depression hit, electric cars were nearly extinct. Detroit Electric managed to squeak out a few custom orders during the 30s, but after World War II, electric cars become a thing of the past. The gas shortages of the 1960s and 70s did renew some interest in the topic of EVs, but nothing ever really took off, and by the 1980s, the topic was dead once again. The US government had an increased interest in environmental regulations during the 1990s, and a few ideas came to boardroom tables, including GM, which moved forward with a car called the EV1. And in 1997, Toyota came out with a hybrid vehicle, which, as a car guy, I refuse to call by name. But as we move into today's world, we continue to discuss and address environmental concerns, and now we find ourselves in a full EV renaissance. So are EVs the future? That answer is a maybe, because today the answer looks like yes, but tomorrow we might find new technology that totally antiquates batteries. But one thing is certain, there's nothing that will replace the experience of an internal combustion engine car. When you have things like Ferrari V12s and Alpha 8Cs, nothing will ever compare to that experience. Ooh. I spotted a Tesla. I knew there'd be one around here somewhere. I wonder if the owner's around.